We are talking recruiting with our man, John Garcia from Sports Illustrated, back on the pod again. We're going to talk 2023 prospects, 2024 prospects, and then we're going to talk about the big picture of recruiting in the SEC East. All of that coming up today on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I am Daniel. Welcome to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. Want to thank LinkedIn, who is the official recruiting sponsor across all of Locked On. LinkedIn helps you connect with the candidates that you want faster, so you can post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. John, thanks for coming back. Thanks for being on the show again today. How's your week so far?
It's going good. We're getting closer to that first college football game, so it's exciting on all levels. Just gearing up. I think I got to submit my my predictions at SI for the playoff like this week. Ooh. So I'm already like, wow, we're already at that stage. So it's exciting.
We're in it.
You know, we're gonna be nice and wrong early on, and it'll be fun.
Love to see it. You want to give the people? Are the people at the Locked On Bulldogs podcast going to be pleased when they read your predictions for the playoff, or are they going to be disappointed?
I think there'll be some SEC flavor. I don't know if it will feel like last year at the very top of that, but there's definitely look. I'm not settled, first of all, but look, if there's going to be a two-team representation for one conference, it will mimic what we saw last year. But I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I'm still playing around with it just a little bit. I think the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are a little funky, where it could be a 12-0 team, or the conference champion is like 9-3. So it's really interesting to try to make that call at this point. But we'll give it a shot.
Well, we'll talk offline. I'll try to talk you into it. But I think that makes for an exciting. The parity makes for an exciting season. From a prediction standpoint, it makes it hard, but from just a fan standpoint, it's going to be a fun season to watch. So want to jump in and talk first, maybe some big picture. We ask you, you come on here and you're very gracious and you talk to us about all these kids and what you're hearing about them and what you're feeling about them. But maybe if you could zoom back a little bit, we know that King Kirby is on top of the SEC East when it comes to recruiting. That has, that's been the case since he arrived in Athens. And from one guy's perspective, he hasn't had much competition. Dan Mullen, a self-proclaimed, doesn't care about recruiting, is not interested in recruiting. Yeah. And Tennessee's had coaching turnover. A lot of the powers in the SEC East. Mark Stoops really the only guy that's got tenure and that's been there and so on. So, but these days it seems like there's some SEC East teams trending upwards when it comes to recruiting. So, from a Georgia fan's perspective, who do we need to keep an eye on in the East? Who poses the biggest threat to Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs long term?
Yeah, in the East, it's hard, right? And we all know the biggest threat is not in that side of the conference. It's on the other side.
Sure.
And I would say an Ohio State or even, a Clemson would come up before some of the Eastern programs. But yeah, things are changing. I think that's safe to say. The perception is shifting a little bit relative to the beyond Georgia tier of the East. And I think it's been interesting. Like right now, there's at least 3 programs that we feel like are moving in the right direction. Obviously, the primary one is Florida relative to momentum and the state that they exist within. Look, the Gators, when they've got a staff that's organized and wants to recruit, let's say, relative to the Dan Mullen stuff, it's going to be advantageous for them. They're always going to be able to pull in premier talent, and we're seeing the Gators contend for better talent under Billy Napier. It's not just about winning battles in Florida, because of course there's a million great players in Florida, and you can build an all Florida roster and try to feel good about it optically or geographically. But unless you're going head to head with Kirby, with Nick, with Dabo, with Ryan Day, with Mario Cristobal now, I would say, in that state, then it starts to resonate more. And we've seen the Gators over the last 2 months in particular really start to hit their stride, and they're doing it in important metros. Very, very strong in Jacksonville, which has been Georgia's kind of picking and prodding grounds for several years. And then they're bolstering the two metro areas that should kind of belong to them, Tampa and Orlando. Although, again, we've seen other schools certainly make headway in those areas. But I think Florida's doing a good job collectively and from a volume perspective of competing in those areas. And if we saw the team photo of Florida the other day, 140 staffers, 140 polo shirts or whatever it was on there. That is something different at UF, to say the least. That is very much more Kirby-like or Nick Saban-like. So I think in that regard, resourcefully, Florida will eventually be that leveled off true competitor to Georgia, but it does feel like it's a far away off projection at this point. But we'll see. I think that the start has been really strong for Billy Napier. I think Kentucky, who you mentioned earlier, is just steady. I don't think it's going to be a threat in terms of, hey, we want this one recruit and Kentucky is going to be the biggest threat to pull him away from Athens. I don't think it's going to be that black and white. But in terms of the cultural fit, the stability, the stuff that's really important, zoomed out in recruiting, yes, Kentucky is the primary threat because, like you said, Stoops is the most tenured, and Kentucky kind of just feels the safest beyond Georgia in that side of the division. But I do think recruiting-wise, they're still a little bit more niche, strong defensively, and they have to find the right fit offensively, and that pulls them more into the Midwest recruiting footprint as opposed to that traditional SEC footprint where you got to win in Georgia, in Florida, in New Orleans, in Alabama, and up into the Carolinas. They're more Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. That's kind of their regional footprint. But the one trending the most recently, I guess, in the surprising department would certainly be South Carolina. They have done a good job close to home, as you would expect, but they've also pushed into Georgia and Florida simultaneously and have started to make a real run at some big-time prospects. So that would be the program that I think is the most lightning in the bottle-ish of the entire group under Shane Beamer, who brings youth, energy, and this combination of experience that obviously is resonating with recruits at this time. So I think they could be the one, if the stars align, they could challenge Florida as the true top threat. But I think all things even, the Gators will still be that school from a recruiting perspective, while Kentucky has held that from an on-field perspective. And then Tennessee offensively, of course, I think is going to have that opportunity to compete with Georgia for top prospects over time, though this class isn't really reflective of that right now. Outside of quarterback, where they did win head-to-head for Nico Iamaleava, Tennessee's class is stronger on defense. So it's a little odd, but it's not strong to the point where it's contending with Georgia's there as like a top 5 group nationally. So the East is interesting. It is ever fluid, it feels like, but all things even, it will probably be the Gators, and that's probably how it should be.
Yeah. Somebody might have convinced Josh Heupel that you have to play defense to win football games. It's unclear at this point, but it's possible that he's come around on that point. All right, I want to get into some Georgia-specific prospects. I want to look at some 2023 guys, and then even project ahead to 2024, because that is very much at play at this point. First, want to talk to you about the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. You're hanging out with friends, you're putting a few drinks away, and a few becomes a few too many, but you think you're fine. You decide that you're going to drive home. Because what are the odds that you're going to get pulled over? And what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you have devastating and tragic consequences. If you think that you are okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life forever. There's Lyft, there's Uber, there's a million different things that you can do to get home. Don't be an idiot. This is not the copy that I'm supposed to read, but this is just me telling you. Don't be an idiot. Drive sober. or get pulled over. A message from the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. All right, John, let's talk 2023. We talked several weeks ago about Samuel Mpemba. At one time, committed elsewhere, but now his recruitment seems to have changed dramatically. It seems from an outsider perspective, it's Georgia and Miami. Potentially, Mario Cristobal, you mentioned earlier. He is certainly having a say in the way that things go recruiting-wise on this side of the country. So what do you see as a projection? Is it late enough in the game that you feel comfortable making a projection for him? And where do you think Georgia's chances are with a guy like that?
Yeah, I think, Daniel, Georgia's held the most buzz for the longest stretch now with Mpemba. Early on, it was Notre Dame. LSU got some of that when Brian Kelly made his move. He was going to commit, like you said, last fall, and he was right on the doorstep. I think it would have been Notre Dame if he was on the doorstep, but he held back. And then really since that point, Georgia has grasped a lot of this momentum for Mpemba. I do think LSU is still in it, but like you said, you're on it. I think Miami's become that primary challenger to the Bulldogs because of Cristobal, the whole IMG thing as well. I mean, Georgia and Miami have recruited that school as well as any in the country for 22 and 23. So I do think that stuff begins to play a factor, especially with Miami. Miami's got like 3 commits in the trenches at IMG. So naturally, that's the group that Mpemba's working with and against every day. So there is some connections there. But I think over the long haul, this is the primary edge on Georgia's board, and it's the year of the edge, and there's still great ones available. Keon Keeley decommitted from Notre Dame. You have Mpemba. There's Damon Wilson, who's right down the road from Mpemba. They just played each other last week at Venice High School. It's a great year to need edges, and Georgia's in on really 3 of the top 4 guys in the class. No surprise there. But I think of the 3, you feel best about Mpemba. And it doesn't mean you're out for the other 3, but I think that tells you a lot about Georgia's pursuit of him over time. His future position coach was recruiting him back at the TCU days as well for if he picks UGA. He was joking about playing Madden with him the other day. So this relationship has been built beyond, hey, we want you to come rush the passer here. There's a familiarity there. He's obviously been to Athens already. He'll go back this fall. So I think there's just a comfort at Georgia that has emerged. And that's part of what you would expect when these kids from other parts of the country go to IMG. There's just a little bit more push towards the SEC because that is what mimics IMG the most, right? Good on good every day in practice, all that kind of stuff. And so when you get into the Georgias, the Miamis, the Alabamas of the world, that area of the country just starts to make more sense, even for a kid from St. Louis. So I think Georgia's still the primary school, but like you said, it still feels early here. He's going to take a bunch of visits. He's in no rush to make that decision. He's talked about narrowing his list. I think he's at like 6 or 7. He'll narrow it to 3 or 4. If and when he does, Georgia will make that cut. Miami makes that cut. And then I think it's open. Tennessee, Florida, Oregon, LSU, Notre Dame. So some of those are those in the mix. But I think Georgia and Miami are the safest in this regard. It's probably too early to make the final call because I don't think he's taken any officials. So that will start to influence things, but all things even, you trust what Georgia has presented here. We know there's a need at edge, and even though there's some great ones available, I think the most traction is with Mpemba. So I think it's Georgia's race to lose at this stage, although there's still a few months left in the game.
You mentioned Keeley and some other guy. Could you see him taking multiple at that position if that becomes an option?
Yeah, I mean, last year they signed my favorite edge class in the country, right? Michael Williams and these guys. So, 3 SI-99 recruits, and all 3 that we just named in this class are SI-99 guys as well. So, I mean, it's one of those positions where you have a hard time saying no to those elite players because they really do change the game. And I think Georgia obviously has the best sell in the country right now, not only with the on-field production and the national title and all that, but then you throw in just that position, number one overall in the draft, and so much other successful points to point out. Nolan Smith will be great this year as well to follow up. So, and now playing time's available on top of that, in theory.
Yeah.
So it should be a strong sell for the Bulldogs in this cycle, despite some of that coaching turnover that we saw maybe contribute to a slower start in 2023. All that stuff is going to start to be less important in pointing out what's going to happen, because the season is here and George is going to be good on defense, and these kids are going to be able to go to Athens and see it develop. So, yeah, I think there's room for multiple edges in this class, and that's where the conversation begins with Mpemba for me.
Yeah, and I think you've seen even too some of these guys get on campus, and Kirby and Glenn Schumann. There's been some movement in terms of position, and so a lot of you end up signing, like you said. At the end of the day, it almost becomes you just get the talented guys on campus, and then you figure out how to get them on the field. Kirby has shown in the past that we might need to play 3-4 edge guys on a down, or we might need to play 3-4 interior guys on a down. We're going to get the right guys on the field. And so, you would feel great about that to sign back-to-back great classes at the edge. Maybe the most critical spot on the defense in today's college football. And so important there. All right, let's come back. We're going to fast forward to 2024, talk about a prospect that is getting a lot of buzz around the University of Georgia, and see if John's got any other names for us to keep an eye on. We'll be back right after this. All right, John. So 2024, now we get into the real degenerates who are just, we are days away from the college football season in 2022. And there are people out there who 2023 recruiting is not even enough for them. They need to know about 2024 recruiting because there's something just clearly messed up about their brain. So for their sake, let's talk about some of these 2024 prospects. And I would love to start with King Joseph Edwards, linebacker prospect, just from down the road, right? He's from Buford, I believe. And so obviously good high school program, great player. What do you like about him? And how do you feel about Georgia's chances for him early on?
Look, we just talked about the easy sell it is for Georgia at the edge position, and this one is in their backyard at Buford. So it's going to be tough for any school to come in here and change the likelihood, if Georgia truly covets him like we think they do, to pull him out of there. Now, I will say there's a long way to go. Obviously, 2024 recruit, so his junior season of high school literally began on Friday. So there's a long way to go. And then he's got a long list of schools in the mix, right? Michigan, Texas, Bama, Miami, LSU, USC, I think, got him on campus this summer. There's a long list here. And he's going to take a ton of visits. I think he just tweeted it out yesterday. He's going to take like 7, 8, 10 game visits this fall. But Athens is going to be, chief among them. And it's going to be tough to pull him out of state lines, assuming, again, he's the priority we think he is. 6'5", 240, just a mature player, a mature prospect who already has that build of today's college edge. He's got that build in high school. Reminds me a little bit of Mykel Williams, just in terms of that size where you're like, he's an edge right now, 100%. But you could also kind of see him in one way, shape, or form building into one of these hybrids. And again, Georgia specializes in that. It seems like where it's like Travon Walker-esque in that, yes, you are an edge, but you are built height, weight-wise like a guy who puts his hand in the dirt. So we'll use you at both. I think he's got some of that Mykel in him from that height and weight standpoint, and the skill set and maturity is reflective there as well, where this isn't a kid who's just trying to beat you with power or speed. There is some technique, there's some hand fighting, there is some pass rushing moves and combination moves thereafter. So there's a lot to like with King Joseph's game, and we've gotten to see him do that as a sophomore, and certainly this offseason we saw him do it against older prospects at just about every camp that he was at. He really blew up and became, one of the nation's most coveted pass rushers, even though he's just a rising junior at this stage. But again, Buford kid, pass rusher, close to home, just going to be tough for anyone to pull him out there, especially because it doesn't seem like he's ready to end the process soon. So this one, it's like the longer it goes on, the more he's going to be in Athens, the more he's just going to kind of feel that within state lines. And that's hard to beat at the end of the day, more times than not.
Yeah. And, if you're a 17-year-old kid, why would you not take a visit to USC? Why would you not go take some of these? Absolutely. But I think you're right that the longer it goes, the more it becomes about a business decision and less about where's a fun place to go for the weekend. I think Georgia feels good. All right. There's way too many names to talk about, but maybe just give Georgia fans one or two 2024 names to keep an eye on as the process moves forward.
Well, you got a couple commits in state, right? Landon
Sure.
Thomas, Nikar. Those are obviously ones that you love. But look, you can't talk 2024 recruiting in Georgia without talking KJ Bolden, a teammate of King Joseph Edwards at Buford, just a do-it-all defensive back. A lot of the stuff we say about Caleb Downs this cycle as like we're not really worried about the evaluation. It's more like, hey, where is he going to go? Of course, we know that answer now, but I think that's the same kind of deal with KJ. You just feel like, hey, that's the best guy in the state. Just let that happen. And his recruitment's going to reflect that. It's going to be, probably in the end, it's going to be another Kirby versus Nick kind of deal there. And again, he's a Buford kid, so a little bit closer to Athens. And one, I would say, that is similar to Caleb in that, man, this was identified early. Caleb Downs as a freshman, sophomore, were like scholarship offers, visits. He's already going through it. KJ's in that mold as well. But again, the longer it stretches out, especially coming off of the Natty and some of that success we've seen at the position, it's going to be tough to get him out, certainly out of Georgia. But I think outside of that Kirby and Nick bubble of Georgia, Bama, it's just going to be hard for anyone to contend with that. Because at the top of the show, we talked about the recruiting threats to Georgia. It's always in the West. It's always Alabama, and it's like a coin flip. You could really build it so easily for either school. So when you're that, highly thought of this early on, that's really where the conversation is going to begin. And I think there's more onus for Georgia to grab KJ Bolden because of what happened with Caleb Downs.
Sure.
2023. So now there's a little bit more pressure. Like, hey, you can't lose the number one safety back-to-back years in the state, although they could recover and it would be fine. Optically, perceptionally, that stuff's important in recruiting. So I think KJ Bolden is going to get as full court of press as there could be from that Georgia perspective, and that alone is going to be tough to beat.
Sure. Yeah. It's going to be fun. It always is. John, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for jumping on as always. Good luck with those playoff projections. I know you'll do the right thing. I know in your heart, that there's only one right answer. And we're excited to have you back and talk more Georgia football recruiting soon. Thanks for jumping on.
Sounds good. Anytime. Take care.